The Ark Royal Intel Carrier. This has been a very popular ship among the new ships introduced with the 15th anniversary bundle. Not quite as popular as the Shangri-La, but you're never going to compete with a Sea Store or Constitution. But this has still been a very popular ship among the players, mainly because this is it's a carrier, which a lot of people were hesitant to get behind because science carriers have always had a reputation of being underpowered, but they're doing something new with this one, and they gave it a secondary deflector, something I still have mixed feelings on. If you remember, I made a video not that long ago. I don't think a secondary deflector is the way to go for carriers. Personally, I feel like they need to focus more on the pets, and they should be giving these things an innate buff to the hangar pets rather than just slapping a secondary on them, because then you just turn all carriers into science ships at that point, and then it makes all other science vessels look not quite as good, because what's the point of flying a normal science vessel when I can fly a normal science vessel that also has 2 hangar bays? Anyway, I've already gone on that rant in another video. I don't need to go on it here again. Let's talk about this ship specifically, because this is a cool ship, you guys. I mean, not just because they did give it a secondary deflector. So if you like EPG builds, you're gonna want to look at this ship, because like it's got a Intel temporal setup, which is really great for EPG builds. You can get a good number of anomalies on there, so you're gonna be able to trigger spore infused anomalies like crazy on this thing. You're gonna have tons of options for unconventional systems triggers or secondary deflector triggers on here. So you're gonna be able to do quite a bit of stuff with this thing for, you know, crazy science space magic stuff, and you're gonna have the added bonus of, since it's a carrier, you got 2 hangar bays. So you got 2 hangar bays full of pets that you can have them doing their own crazy thing. You can load up mainly the smart thing would be to load up the Type 7 shuttles for all that debuff. Those are going to be the best option for you, but there are some other options that you can do to apply some more crazy space magic stuff. Like there's the pets off of the Celestial, I think it's called. They can add some more temporal shenanigans there, so you can feed more into the entropy mechanic if you wanted to. But mainly the Type 7s are going to be the best in slot for pretty much anything, for pretty much any build that you throw on this thing. That said, that didn't stop me. I threw on a pair of Kodai fighters on here because I wanted to go for a full carrier theme on the ship instead. I've been seeing a lot of questions about secondary deflectors. That's probably going to be a different video, because there are several different types of secondary deflectors, and there are a bunch of different modifiers that you can apply to secondary deflectors that will be better suited to different types of builds. I went with an inhibiting secondary deflector on this one, which not really the best secondary deflector, but these trigger with a lot of control abilities, and with this build I went pretty crazy on here, so there's a lot of control abilities on this build, so I figured, alright, let's just go with the inhibiting, because it synergizes really well with that. But normally deteriorating it would be better for a lot of cases, but that would be something more for an EPG build, which this isn't really. Again, I'm going to do another video in the future that goes into more detail just on the nature of secondary deflectors and what might be best for your type of build. Yeah, the big thing I can't get over with this is just how freaking pretty this ship is. It's just a big honkin' TMP era style carrier. This is something I have been dreaming of for ages, of a proper Federation carrier in the Sea Store that doesn't look like a bloated whale that washed up on the beach. Yes, I'm talking about you, Jupiter. Not only do we get this skin, which is the Ark Royal skin, which, fun fact, is actually got a bit of nostalgia linked to it, because this is not an original Star Trek Online design. This was a ship that was originally introduced in the Star Trek Starfleet Command games, which I'm sure some of you have already heard me talking about plenty as it is, because when this ship was teased, this was kind of the part of the reason why we thought this bundle was going to end up being Heritage 2.0, basically, because the Heritage bundle consisted of a bunch of ships from older Star Trek video games, and this is also a ship that fits into that category, so we figured, okay, we're going to see more of those. But nope, we didn't. This was the only one from an older game. The rest of them ended up being Shangri-La, which is not from an older video game, but is actually original design from Bill Krause, which later inspired the Enterprise G. We got the Kerala, which that came out of nowhere. That's just a TMP Gagarin, which is a Stowe original ship, and then it was the same with the Pioneer 2. That was another Stowe original ship originally that was also canonized in Picard, and then given the T6 treatment finally, which is something a lot of players have been asking for. So it actually makes the Ark Royal here a bit of an outlier for the rest of the bundle, but honestly that's fine because it's gorgeous. I love this thing. I was a big fan of the Starfleet Command games. back in the day, and I remember playing Starfleet Command 2. I always found this ship really fascinating. Like, of all the other original ships to that game, like the Starfleet Command games did introduce other like big, crazy styled ships for the TMP era, like the Yamato and Ulysses class ships. But this one I always found to be the most interesting one. Just the idea of a proper carrier in Starfleet was something I always thought was interesting. And I feel like this one was executed design-wise really well. And Star Trek Online has carried that over very well. Not only that, but they gave it a second skin on this too. So you can either fly this as a TMP era Ark Royal-class, or you can go into the ship's tailor and customize it to look like the Kitty Hawk class carrier, which is meant to be more of a Picard era style ship, which we'll get a look at that later in the visual review. Yeah, this ship it is something else. I'm still, like I said, I'm still a bit wary about that secondary deflector. I feel like this sets a precedent that is going to hurt older science vessels. But yeah, again, I'm not going to rant about that too much in this video. Go watch the other video if you want to hear more about that. But yeah, this ship absolutely going to be fantastic for an EPG build. I'm not going to say it's going to be like the best EPG build in the game yet, because like the seating could have been a little bit better, but it's probably a good thing that it's not, because like I know some EPG players are going to scoff a bit at that Lieutenant Commander tactical seat there, and it also would have been better if they had swapped the specialization seat a bit so that the it was primary temporal and secondary intel, but you know, you can't have everything. Yeah, this is not a good example of an EPG build. This was meant to be a carrier support build, similar to what I did on the Awani a while back. If you want an EPG build, check out my premonition video. That's going to be a bit of a better example of what you might want to do on here. You'll just have to swap in some intel seating instead of going full ham on the temporal seating. You probably won't have to go super crazy on the intel seat, but you definitely want to get like ionic turbulence, which is a really great thing for anomalies there. And maybe some other uncon triggers like EMP pulse probe, but mainly, well, actually, ionic turbulence is also a uncon trigger, so that'll work too, regardless. But yeah, that's going to be like the big one you're going to want to have there. Yeah, honestly, solid ship if you like carriers, and even more solid if you like sciencey space magic builds, because this is going to be well suited for that. Borticus did confirm that the secondary deflector on this thing is meant to be like a special case that they are testing out, because a secondary deflector on carriers is something that much of the player base has been very insistent on in, you know, kind of beefing up science carriers a little bit. Again, something I don't really agree with, but you know, what do I know? But yeah, this is something that they are experimenting with on the Ark Royal. If it does well for the Ark Royal, they are considering going back to other science carriers in the game and making this change as well. So we'll see how that goes. Again, it's absolutely not a guarantee right now. It's definitely something that they're just kind of looking and seeing how it does right now. But again, I'm going to say secondary deflector is not the way to go. Buffing the pets is the way to go. Okay, I promise. The last time I'm going to say it in this video. Okay, let's talk about the Triton console now. The console on this thing is called Scatterpacks and Weasels, which is it's a silly little console. It has terrible passive stats on it, buffing max shields and shield resistance by only plus 5%. Nothing to write home about, but whatever. The click ability though, it will summon 4 Scatterpacks and 4 Wild Weasel shuttlecraft. What these do is the Scatterpack shuttles are basically loaded up with torpedoes or some sort of warheads. The shuttles will explode and then will fire off these Scatterpack warheads at an enemy target, and they will deal a certain amount of kinetic damage, whereas the Wild Weasels are meant to draw threat away from the Scatterpacks. They will function as like normal shuttlecraft, and they will, you know, shoot at your enemy and draw and taunt and attack and draw fire. You know, the usual like, hey, look at me kind of stuff. But yeah, it's not dealing a whole lot of damage. This is another one, like with the Ridge system off of the Pioneer 2. This one's also not scaling properly with a lot of damage skills that you would think it would. Additionally, this one is not. I'm not using this on a full kinetic build, so it's also not receiving a lot of damage buffs that it probably normally should be getting. So this would probably be better suited on a full kinetic build, which I'm not going to run on this one because, you know, Intel temporal combo. I'm not going to run full kinetic on anything that isn't a full command ship, probably, or at least the lieutenant commander command seat on there because concentrate firepower. But yeah, it's a neat little gimmick console. I'm hoping that they resolve that issue with the damage buffs on it. Because it's not scaling properly, and I feel like it should be doing a bit more damage. But yeah, fun little gimmick console. It definitely fits the carrier theme, but I do wish they would tie in those damage buffs to more of those damage skills, so it would scale a bit better. Because otherwise, this could be a really great kinetic build console, especially on a carrier. Something like the Zentaur or the Friendship could really benefit from this. Because those have command seating, so you can use something more kinetic focused on those ships. But yeah, as it's not going to serve much purpose on this ship, unfortunately. It's just for the sake of theme. And it's actually kind of the same story with the Starship trait, Mine All Mine. This is another one. Every time you launch Hangar Bay Pets, it will launch some mines along with it. Those mines will then teleport to your furthest foe away from you and deal some kinetic damage upon detonation, because they're mines. That's kind of what they do. And this is another one I feel like would be better served on a full kinetic build rather than just an ordinary carrier build. But you still need the pets in order to trigger it. So again, this is going to be something that's going to be best suited for a carrier or a dreadnought carrier, particularly a dreadnought carrier or a flight deck carrier. With enough command seating for a torpedo build, so you can go like a full kinetic build with mine support, as well with pet support. So in this case, you'd be able to have both. Of course, with how easy it is to summon pets and mines, even on a normal flight deck carrier, adding this into the mix, you're going to be hitting that object limit real quick, because that's going to be a lot of entities in one map. So stuff is going to, if more than one person is going to be running that sort of build type, stuff's going to be disappearing like crazy on those maps. I do like the fact that the mines target your furthest enemy away from you. I feel like that's a really interesting gimmick, so you can establish some you can peck away at your enemies that aren't that close to you, because you're going to be mainly focused on stuff that's closer to you. So it's a good way to kind of spread some of that damage around. I do like that aspect of this trait. But overall, it's another one that I don't feel like is going to be super useful. Another thing with this thing, you're going to want more of those Hangar Bay duty officers that will reduce the cooldown of your Hangar Bay pets. You have to grind those manually through the duty officer missions. You can pick up those in sector space around the sectors of Deep Space Nine. But yeah, you have to grind those out manually. I'm still getting my hands on enough of them for this character. I don't have any on this character. I think I only have one on my main. So yeah, I'm trying to play a little catch up there. You can buy them on the exchange too, but last I checked, they were like 70 mil a pop, and I just don't feel like spending that much on duty officers that I'm only going to use on one build. Yeah, overall, the Starship trait and the console are both interesting, kind of gimmicky. They're going to be well suited to specific build types. The console, I feel like, really needs to be tied into more damage buffs or more damage skills, so it scales a bit better. But overall, they're interesting, but they're not going to be anything super special. The real treat here is the ship itself, because like I said, full science ship that's also a carrier, because that's something that needed to happen apparently. But it's well executed and it looks gorgeous. Yeah, so I'm really pleased with this ship overall, and a lot of that, admittedly, is also a nostalgia factor because this comes from an old Star Trek video game that I was very fond of too, and I was already fond of the ship itself because of that game too. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this. So yeah, let's get into the visual review now. Oh, actually, before we do that, I wanted to talk about one other thing, and that is the pets that this thing comes with. I totally glossed over those. So this will come with 2 different pets for the hangar bays. It'll come with these by default. These are the Kodai Command Fighter Squadrons. These are the basic version, and it'll also come with the Type 4 shuttlecraft. These are equipped with these will have pulse phasers, and they are equipped with Beam Overload 1. These are the basic version, but they will have Beam Overload 3 with the elite versions, and as well as Aceton Beam. But the thing is, the elite level versions, they are not labeled correctly. They didn't scale up the tooltip for whatever reason. The actual pets are fine. They do have those abilities, but the tooltips are just incorrect. They still have the base level version of the tooltip. So don't be afraid to upgrade these to the elite level versions from your Fleet Star base. A good thing to note about these things too is if their stats sound familiar, it's because they are. These are basically just copy pasted versions of the Class C shuttles, which isn't a bad thing. Like Beam Overload 3 on a shuttle pet is actually fairly powerful, and Ace Beam can be used to, debuff some enemies reasonably well. So it's not gonna be like a super powerful pet. Like even the Kodais would still be more powerful. Type 7s are always going to be best in slot until they introduce something that has even more debuff on them, I guess. But if you want to do something more in the typical carrier theme that relies more on the power, or the actual like damage power of your pets, but you don't have superior area denial, these Type 4 shuttles are going to be really good options because, again, they're exactly the same as the Class C shuttles. So they have Beam Overload 3 on them. You don't need SAD on them because they already have a firing mode. In fact, with SAD, you're just going to be hurting that Beam Overload effect. So just go with these if you don't have SAD. But if you do have superior air denial, go with the Kodai fighters because all that scatter volley from those cannons is going to be really nice. Oh, actually, one more last thing on here. The tooltip says phaser pulse cannons. I don't know why it says cannons. It has a beam array. It has a pulse phaser beam array. I don't know why it says cannons. That's another weird thing with the tooltip that I don't understand there. But yeah, another weird thing here is the Kodai command fighters. This has the Kodai command fighters have were introduced with the legendary Akira. It has a unique ability called command integration. Anytime you activate the command inspiration mechanic, you will activate an extra, I think it gives it an extra torp spread or something like that. And because of that, it sacrifices some of its traditional DPS. And these were interesting because it's a new way to feed into the specialization mechanics, but is kind of pointless to have them on this ship because this is an intel carrier. It doesn't have the command specialization. So what was the point of putting these on the Ark Royal here? Because it won't be able to use those. Fortunately, there are standard versions of these Kodai fighters without the command integration, which you would want better because the command integration, they do sacrifice some of their normal DPS for that integration. So get the normal ones without the command integration so they can have their full amount of damage without the command integration, because you won't get anything out of the command integration on the Ark Royal here. One last thing to point out with the Kodai fighters. The Kodai fighters, they're effectively copy-pasted from the Valkyrie fighters, and I think part of that is why these things have the incorrect animation for their weapons. They have the standard phaser animation, despite the fact that it clearly says pulse cannons in the tooltip. So, yeah, they are TMP era fighter craft, but they have the incorrect phaser animation. They should have the pulse phaser animation now, but they don't. They still have the standard phaser mechanic, and I'm hoping that it gets fixed sometime in the future, but as of right now, it has the standard phaser animation, and it's bugging the hell out of me. Okay, now let's get into the visual review portion of the video. This is the Ark Royal big honkin' TMP carrier. I really like this thing because not only does it fit pretty well with like the typical TMP era design aesthetic, but it does some interesting stuff that, like that don't make it just a straight up kit bash of the classic Constitution refit, which it seems to be kind of a theme here with this bundle. It's TMP era ships that aren't just rearranging the classic Constitution's parts here, because it does have like a very typical TMP era saucer, but there are some noticeable changes. The bridge dome is very different on this thing. The RCS thrusters are in a different spot. These lines along the saucer section, these are kind of reminiscent of the Excelsior, but they're also blue, which that's not a color you typically see those in. You usually see these in red on TMP era ships, but also an interesting thing, change their color. These are part of the pattern, so you can change these to whatever color you want, along with the rest of the blue on here, so don't feel like you need to stick with the blue there. And then, of course, it's got this big, long body for all the hangar bays on here, as well as this little control tower up here, which I always thought was kind of neat looking there, because this is clearly the bridge down here. That's where that would be. So this is meant to be like some sort of flight control tower there, which is neat. And we've got the much more typical looking TMP era main deflector dish, but on a body that definitely looks much different from the typical Constitution class. It's much bigger, much flatter, but also much more detail in there. more hangar bays in the back here. So you probably like launch them out of the side bays, and then they return through the aft bays. Though if you actually launch them in the game, they actually launch out of the front for some reason when they definitely should be launching out of the side. Whatever. Yeah. Then we got the torpedo bays down here above the deflector dish, which is a pretty typical place to be putting them for a Starfleet ship. And then it's got 4 nacelles, which look really great. This is also these have the nacelle glows by default because that's how it looked in the game too. So that's how that is. One cool thing about this thing is that they threw in some customization options in here, not just with the nacelles here, but they did give you both the normal nacelle glows as well as some red Bussard collector options there, like with the other TMP era ships on here. But if you go into the hull, you can also have an option with open hangar bays, which we do see this briefly in the trailer as well. And Pundus actually talked about on the live on Kale's live stream how basically the only reason this ended up happening is because he needed a shot in the trailer where the doors were open, where the fighters would be launching from, and apparently it only ended up in the trailer for like half a second. But you figured since he went through all the effort of making that on the model for the trailer, all right, I guess it's going in the live game too, which I do love this detail. So thank you, pundits, for going to that extra mile for this thing, because it's a fun thing to have. I do like it when we can have an option of having uh, getting a look at the inside of some of these ships, even though technically we probably shouldn't. But I do love this kind of stuff. Yeah, those are the options for the Ark Royal. Here is the Kitty Hawk. This is meant to be a early 25th century era version of the ship, obviously in the design style from Star Trek Picard. And again, this is absolutely gorgeous. Jamie Armstrong did this one, aka Scorpion Designs. They did a fantastic job on the ship. I'm not normally a huge fan of the Picard era, and I will say I do think the ship would have ended up looking a lot better in a typical Star Trek Online era, but this is a pretty ship. Like, I get why they would want to go with the Picard era, because one, it's a design language that they haven't played around with a whole lot in Star Trek Online, and it's an excuse to kind of get this language out. Because I'm sure there are players that definitely want more ships in the Picard style, or especially one that isn't a lockbox or promo ship. Because right now, like, the only ones have been the Constitution 3, the Sagan, the Duderstadt, which all have been lockbox or promo ship, and there was one and there was that Nova class variant that was remastered into the Picard style. But again, that's going to be the a Nova class scout ship isn't going to be everyone's vibe, so this is going to be a very different ship, but also in this design language, which I'm sure plenty of you will appreciate. Yeah, really pretty ship on this thing. One thing to note is this is using the Constitution 3 hull by default, and it is using the animation on the nacelles that the Constitution 3 has, which I know some people are really into this look. It's a little passive thing, little detail that I'm sure plenty of people probably missed, but once you see it, it's kind of cool that it's there. I know there are several people wishing that the Sagan had this animation, because it doesn't for some reason, because apparently the Sagan doesn't have this animation in the show, but the Constitution 3 did. So because the Sagan didn't have it in the show, they haven't ported it over to the Sagan, but they gave it to the Kitty Hawk here, which is cool. Though I did test the bioelectric wave capacitor whenever you activate on the Constitution 3, like the nacelle ports open like it did in the show. They will not do that on the Kitty Hawk here when you use it on this thing. Pundits responded to that post on Blue Sky. Apparently, it's part of the difficulties of the ship having 4 nacelles. That's why it can't do it, because the nacelles are typically separated in Star Trek Online into top and bottom, and yeah, it's not gonna. The animation just wouldn't work on this. It would only apply to like the top ones, and that would end up looking kind of silly. And plus, the console doesn't even come with this ship. It only comes with the Constitution 3, so I can kind of see why they would want to just leave that on the Constitution 3, because, it came with that console. So they put the work in for that console on that ship. The console doesn't come with this ship, so not a lot of reason to bother there. But yeah, pretty ship. I do like how like this one just by default has like an opening here with the force fields, but the doors here are still closed. I don't think this one has. Yeah, this one doesn't have the other doors option as being open, so you're only gonna get that small look into the case there. I like the secondary hull on this thing. I know some people have said they're not that into it. It just looks like it was tacked on as an afterthought. But to me, I kind of like it. It gives me kind of like Enterprise B vibes a little bit, where it just kind of sticks out there around the deflector. I'm kind of into it. I also like the aft bay here. It looks like a proper shuttle bay, like you would see on a lot of Starfleet ships. Whereas on the Ark Royal, the aft bays are kind of tucked down in the bottom of the ship. I do like this idea better, that it's like, you know, tucked into the back of the ship where you would typically see a shuttle bay on a lot of other Starfleet ships. So I do feel like the torpedoes being right above that is a weird point. I would have put those like down here, but considering where they are, well, no, they're down here on on the Ark Royal, so I don't know why they couldn't have been put down there. But yeah, I'm sure there was a reason. So it's not that big of a deal. It's just I think they would have looked better down there, or maybe down here on the bottom of the pod. But semantics, it doesn't really matter. Overall, it is a really pretty looking ship. I will say, I've never been a huge fan of the asymmetric nacelles on the quad nacelled ships. Like this, I like this. You know how they mirror each other, how they're equal lengths apart from each other. I've always liked that for quad nacelles, and it always bugs me when they go a little, when they do something like this on the quad nacelles. But this one, I feel like works a bit better. For one, they're equal, they're parallel on this portion of the ship, but if you look at this part, their top ones are moved forward, but that way it kind of follows the line of the Bussard collectors. So it's not, I don't know, I'm not as nitpicky about this as I am on something like the Sagan. Also, I really like the control tower on this one, whereas the Ark Royal it's just this little bitty little bloop right there on the top, whereas this one, it's like a big honking, yeah, stuff's going on in here kind of area, which I thought that was that just looks cool. Overall, this is a gorgeous ship either way. Like, we got, really cool TMP era ship, or we got really cool Picard era ship. So no matter what era you're wanting to go with, you got something to play around with. You got the classic look, or you've got a more modern look that'll fit better with the rest of the Star Trek Online era stuff. And that's kind of why both of these skins exist. Thomas Maroni wanted to make sure that you weren't just stuck with the TMP era skin, that you would have something that was a little bit more era appropriate to be flying around in 2411, I should say. So yeah, he wanted to give you something that was era appropriate, but also while also giving you something classic as well. And all the other ships already had something that was 2410 appropriate, except for the what was it? The Pioneer, but they gave that one like an Exeter kit bash, whereas this is something totally new, which I do appreciate. Okay, now let's make it look horrible by hitting the randomize button. Oh god. This is already not off to a great start. This pushes the nacelles way back on the ship, which is funny. And it also covers up one of the bays. That's not good. That's just the same thing with a different hull. You're not going to get a lot of variation on this one because there's literally only the 2 skins, so it's mainly going to be just swapping between different hull materials and window types. Hear one of my dogs barking in the background. Really hoping you guys can't hear that through the mic. Yeah, not a lot of variation with this ship, but again, there's only the 2 skins on it, which is fine. It doesn't need a huge amount of stuff in there, but because, I mean, these ships are already so pretty as they are. Like, obviously, these are brand new ships. They're not going to have a huge amount of different customization options, so it's not going to... The fact that they even gave it a second skin is already, like, kind of going above and beyond what you would typically see from Star Trek Online. So it's really cool to see that kind of effort put into. So, yeah. That's the Ark Royal. I'm really happy with this, and I'm sure a lot of you are too. Mostly because of that poll. This one's like, trailing in second place right behind the Shangri-La. So a lot of people seem to be really into this ship. Okay, just like before, I'm going to throw you guys into a Jupiter Gauntlet. It's only going to be on advanced just to give you an idea of what the ship looks like in action. We're not really pushing any boundaries here. It's just a visual demonstration. So I hope you guys like this video, and I hope you guys like this ship. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And while you're down there, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you're ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my creative code STU1701. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. Or you can check out any of the other affiliate links down in the pinned comment. Either way, though, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.